I'm just so grateful for Malaprops for hosting so many wonderful events over the last year and a half. Thanks to all the independent bookstores who are doing this. And I just really, really want to encourage everyone. Um, please buy Jeff's new book. It's great. We're about to talk about it. I'm about to gush about it. But if you already have a copy of this, I just really want to encourage you that like you also never have to buy the book that we're talking about. You can support this event, this store, your own bookstore by buying any book. So I'm going to place a big Malaprops order after this event, and I hope that some of you will too. So I'm so excited. Some of you may have seen Jeff and I talk before. We're really good pals. We have been friends for way before either of us was published, which we were talking about it a little bit before we went live, that's pretty unique. Usually if you're doing an author an event, you've met that other person as an author. But like we've spent Thanksgiving together. We've like had big 4th of July dinners together, like chocolate taste testing, like Oscar parties every single year. It's a deep friendship, a real friendship, just that's not only writing based. So I'm really excited that he's here. And guys, I read this book this week in preparation, and so I am naturally inclined to like his work because he's my friend, but authors also know that like, and readers, that even if you like the person, it doesn't mean you always like love their work. Jeff is one of those really special exceptions to that, where I love his work. I'm a huge, huge fan, and I have been since the first book, The Serpent King. And this one, you guys, is his best one yet. Like, I don't say that lightly. This book is phenomenal. It's the kind of book that could easily be winning awards a few months from now. It blew me away. It made me cry. Most of Jeff's books do. I think you're 3 out of 4 right now, Jeff. And like, I'm a big crier in regular life, but hardly at all when I'm reading. So that's very rare. But Jeff writes about the South with such dignity in a way that I think is really rare. It's dignity, but without overlooking any of the ugliness or poverty that's here. It's this really, really fine line that I think is really, really difficult to do. And then on top of it, he deals with these really, really heavy, big subjects, but they're such page turners. They're so much fun. It's a really, really difficult thing for a writer to do. I think John Green is really good at that. And I think Jeff Zentner is really, really, really good at that. So Jeff, I love you. I'm excited to talk with you. And please give us all a little bit of like, how are you talking about this book to people right now? How are you launching the idea of the book?
Well, first of all, my heart is about 3 sizes bigger in my chest after that wonderful introduction. It is always so exciting to be talking to you in this context. As I told you earlier today, you are truly one of my heroes. And actually, as I was getting ready kind of mentally for this event, thinking about what I wanted to say, it occurred to me how sometimes threads of your life make their way into your books without consciously meaning to do so. And I realized how much of our friendship and our dynamic is contained in the friendship between Cash and Delaney here. We both have these brilliant red-haired friends who have done these amazing things that we would have never thought to do ourselves. And then that friend kind of paved the way and kind of showed us like, no, you can do this. Like, it was really with your encouragement that I started writing at all. I mean, there's no bones about it. I would not be a writer today if it weren't for you kind of paving that way and kind of showing me that it was something that I could do, making me believe in myself. Just absolutely, this book wouldn't exist. So it's always exciting to get to talk to you for these things, because truly, every one of my books from now until the day I die, you share a healthy part of the credit for. So with that on the table, how am I talking about this book? Well,
also, by the way, you can cut me a check anytime you want for the service.
as soon as I make any money with writing these books, I certainly will, believe me. You've earned it for sure. So all of my books kind of start with with kind of pop cultural points of reference, right? So this one really started with my desire to write a boarding school book. I've always loved boarding school books. To me, I think there's a certain type of kid who's drawn to the boarding school book, which is a kid who loved school growing up. And most other kids don't love school. And so when you love school growing up, you kind of want to be around other kids who are like you, and that's hard to find. And so you imagine boarding school as this place where you are permanently like cloistered in with a bunch of other kids who love school. And then you watch, as I did, a movie like Dead Poets Society, and you see all those nerdy kids together and you see them glomming onto something like poetry and loving it together. And it just is so inspiring to you. And then you read a book like Looking for Alaska, and you're like, that's the book I wish I had when I was a teenager. So this is really my Dead Poets Society meets Looking for Alaska. And then there's a healthy dose of Good Will Hunting, which is one of my favorite movies. I've finally started admitting that it is, in fact, one of my favorite movies, even though I strongly suspect it's kind of a dumb bro favorite movie to have. Like the kind of movie that kind of fundamentally dumb bros think is deep. Dude, you gotta watch Good Will Hunting, man. It is like, they are smart in that movie. It's not like a dumb movie, dude. So that's kind of where this book came from. Of course, it's the story of Delaney Doyle, who makes this momentous scientific discovery as a high school sophomore, which earns her a scholarship to this elite Northeastern prep school. And she wants to share the wealth with her best friend, Cash Pruitt. So she finagles a scholarship for him as well. Cash is not a scientific genius like Delaney. He doesn't feel like he's worthy to attend this school with her. And moreover, his grandfather, who raised him, his papa, is dying of emphysema. And he is terrified to leave his grandfather, lest his grandfather die while he's away at school. So that's kind of the plot in a nutshell. Spoiler alert, he does go to the school. It wouldn't be a book this thick if it were just him, I'm just going to stick around here. Also, my whole prelude about wanting to write a boarding school book would have come to naught, really, if I just had him say, you know what? Who needs it? I'm just going to stick around here. So he goes to the school, and there he discovers poetry as a way of recontextualizing, reshaping the experiences of grief, of pain, and fear that he's experienced. And there have been many. His mother died of an overdose when he was young, and he's just kind of generally not had an easy life. So that's the book.
I love your little aside in there about, like, obviously he does go to the school, otherwise the book wouldn't be this big, because I actually had that moment while reading your book where I don't like reading like the summary. I like to just dive in and see where it goes. And actually, in your advanced copy has an author letter in it as well, which when I got to the end and went back and read it, like, it's about the boarding school issue. So I actually didn't know if this large book was just about the decision to go. And I was really excited when you jumped in and you sent them there. And it surprised me as your friend, because your books are so deeply, deeply Tennessee based. And the school is in Connecticut. And I thought it ended up being a really useful tool, actually, in comparing the two. And, it's one more way to make him feel, out of sorts in this new place. But yeah, it was a surprise for me. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about your relationship to Tennessee, because it is so important to all of your literature. All 4 of your books at this point have, taken place largely in Tennessee. And I know, as your friend, that you did not grow up there. So I want to know, when you fell in love with this state, what was it about it? And why can't you stop writing about it?
Yeah, so as you point out, Tennessee is my chosen home. Now, I have lived here now longer than I've lived any other place in my life. So at this point, it truly is the majority of my life. But yeah, I wasn't born here. I wasn't raised here. It's the place that I chose. I'd always felt a really intense spiritual kinship to the American South. Every time I saw depictions of the American South in pop culture, I felt powerfully drawn to the region. There was just this pull. Now it turns out, having done a little bit of family history and genealogy, there was a little bit of ancestral memory going on there. It was, my relatives are all from the South, my ancestors. In fact, Nashville, I've got relatives who were circus performers in Nashville in the 1800s. So there's
Oh, that's a cool job.
yeah. So there's some kind of intense ancestral memory going on there. I discovered too recently, doing like a 23andMe, that I'm mostly Scottish and Irish, which was a complete surprise. Because I so desperately wanted all my life to be Scottish and Irish, because I felt such an incredible kinship to Scotland and Ireland. So I just think I think I'm intensely attuned to ancestral memory or inherited memory or something like that. So
When those groups settled here largely.
Exactly. Yeah.
For
So
people who don't live around here and don't know that history about this part of the country. And I say this shared history because so I'm in North Carolina, Jeff is in Tennessee. We butt up against each other. And in fact, this book takes place in the mountains that our two states share. Yeah, so just to back up for anyone who doesn't live in the States who's watching this right now, there's like the little bit of geographical information. And this whole area was settled by that part of the world.
It looks like the Scottish Highlands. Mm-hmm. And this book actually takes place pretty significantly closer to where Steph lives than where I live, even though it's Tennessee. So why do I write about Tennessee? To me, I love the place I'm at. I love to find the magic and beauty in the place I'm at. So in Nashville, I live there. There are some really hip neighborhoods in Nashville. There are some really cool neighborhoods full of, hip people and coffee shops and all the cool stuff. I don't live in one of those neighborhoods. I live in a really like blue collar kind of working class neighborhood, just lots of families, lots of immigrant families. It's not a hip part of Nashville. And I love it so much. I love to go on walks around my neighborhood. I love to find the little pockets of coolness and the little pockets of bizarreness and the funny little things I pass every day walking. I love the place I am. And I want to discover the beauty in the place where I am. So that's one of the reasons why I write about Tennessee. Another reason why I write about Tennessee is purely functional. I have a day job. It takes up a lot of my time. It leaves me without a lot of time to do book research. I'm, like a Rudis Apetis will, study the Spanish Civil War for 10 years full time and go live in Spain for 3 years. That's just not something I can do. I admire it so much. It's just not available to do that. So I have to gather the twigs that are around me to use to build my nest. And so that's why I write about Tennessee. And it's just a place I love. It's a place that I think is filled with wonderful stories. It's filled with natural beauty. I love everything about it. I just write what I know and I write what I love. Now, the decision to base a lot of this book outside Tennessee, it's a little bit illusory, because what I actually did in this book was to show a tiny little 2-person island of Tennessee that existed at this elite prep school in Connecticut. So I love stories about little islands of people. One of my favorite sci-fi movies of all time, a very underrated one in my opinion, is Sunshine, the Danny Boyle movie. So good, right? So underrated in my opinion. And one of the things that I find really moving about this movie is I feel like it does a better job than other sci-fi movies of showing this tiny little island of humanity existing so far from the earth. And it shows how all human tendencies exist wherever humanity is. Love, compassion, generosity, fundamentalism, fanaticism, all of the things that are human exist everywhere that there is humans. And I wanted to write a book about all things Tennessee existing wherever there are people from Tennessee.
I love that. That's really beautiful. And I'm so curious. Actually, I've got a 2-prong. One, very silly. It's in your book, so I'm allowed to say it. Your son's name is Tennessee. Do you think you fall in love with the state every time you think about your son? Like, do they like work together? Obviously, you love the state enough to give him this name, but do you think that every time you say "I love you, Tennessee," like they're
It like
playing off each other? Yeah.
reinforces some neural pathway? It must. Well, and the funny thing about that is, as you know, he was not born in Tennessee.
No, he
He
wasn't.
was born. So Steph and I know each other from when we both lived in Asheville. Well, Steph lived just outside Asheville, but when I lived in Asheville, and that's where my son was born, and we named him Tennessee with no idea whatsoever we'd be moving back to Tennessee, because we lived in Tennessee before living in North Carolina. So it was all very funny. I've never been asked that before, but as you say it, yeah, I can see that.
I think it's strengthening those pathways in your brain, as you said.
Like drawing over the lines, darkening the lines.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, so Cash, your protagonist in this book, he is really, really great on a river. He canoes, right? As opposed to kayaking. I think I'm remembering that.
Yeah.
And you do as well. Was that something that you had started before the book, or did you try it for research and fell in love with it? Where did that come from?
So I've been kayaking for years before I started this book, and that is really emblematic of how all of my books are kind of a referendum on what I love and I'm fascinated by at the time that I write them. And I try to just jam it all into the book, and find the justification to jam it into the book as much as I can. Try to get the lid on it, tamp down the lid, whatever kind of spills out over the sides, I scrape up and put in the bucket for the next book. Um, but yeah, so I just loved kayaking, and I always want to talk about the things I love in my books, because I feel like that makes a book richer when it's this kind of compendium of loves that an author has. And so I put that in the book. It works out well too, because East Tennessee is a beautiful place to canoe and kayak, and I feel like it made a lot of sense for Cash to be drawn to the natural world in that way. If I were going to justify this character trait in him, that he becomes a poet later, I feel like I needed to lay the groundwork for him having some connection to beauty, because I think that's really essential to being a poet, is to have some sort of direct line to beauty, to have some sort of grounding in beauty.
Absolutely. And I think it's a really difficult thing, actually, to have a novel with a substantial amount of poetry in it. And for it to both feel very, very like necessary to the novel and also to the character. A lot of times when I see a book with a poem or with like song lyrics in it, I'm like, like, yeah, like I'm going to read this. And I'm just flipping, like Tolkien is the biggest
Oh man.
example of this that I always think of first. Like the moment I see like those stanzas, I'm like, I'm not reading this. You may put it in front of me and I'm not going to read it. And
I call it the, sorry to interrupt you, but I call it the Queens Boulevard phenomenon, because I don't know if you were ever unfortunate enough to watch the show Entourage. I hope not. And I hope nobody listening has had that great misfortune. But on the show Entourage, the HBO show that's maybe one of the worst shows ever, but I somehow watched like 4 seasons of, there is a movie within the show. So there's art within the art. And this movie is called Queens Boulevard. And the show asks us to accept that this show, Queens Boulevard, is this great, masterful work of independent cinema. And it just looks like utter dog crap. I mean, it looks horrible. And so that I always call it the Queens Boulevard phenomenon. Like, I gotta avoid Queens Boulevard.
Yeah, and you did. And I mean, honestly, like I am racking my brain. I know they exist out there, the good examples, but I can't think of one. I just genuinely like it's not my thing when I see it happening. And I thought the poetry in this book was beautiful and it fit.
Oh, thank you.
And it advanced the story. Like it did all the things that it was supposed to do. And you did lay that groundwork for this character discovering this thing. And so I'm curious about your relationship with poetry, because obviously, the public knows you as a novelist. I know that you have a music background as well. And, you know, anyone who reads your bio can see that. But that's which is poetry adjacent for sure, but it's still not the same thing. And so I'm wondering what your relationship with that is. Were you like a kid who wrote poetry, and then you know, did you have the bad teen poetry? Did you fall away from it as an adult for a while and come find your way back to it, or was it always there? Like how has that relationship changed over the years?
Yeah, so first of all, let me point out something that I think you, with your keen editorial eye, will appreciate. You will notice that as you went through the text, very little of the poetry was actually integrated into the main text. And the reason I did that was so that those poems would be very easy to cut out if they sucked. Like my editor just had to snip out the page and it's gone, and there's no like other like unweaving to do. Like it just gets snipped out and it's gone, because I was a little kind of hedging my bets, like I don't know if this is going to work, because I'm exactly the way you are, right? I don't generally like poems in the text. I don't generally, especially if I'm asked to believe that this is an amazing poet, or especially if I'm being asked to believe that this is an amazing songwriter. In Serpent King, my main character Dill is a songwriter. There is nary a lyric of his in the book, because I wanted him to be better than me, and I wanted to not impose on your imagination those lyrics. I want you to imagine the best lyrics you possibly could, and those are the lyrics, not what I'm going to give to you, because what I'm going to give to you is probably not going to be the best thing that you can ever imagine, you know? So yeah, it very rarely works for me. Like I said, this book is a compendium of my loves and fascinations. And I was really coming back around to poetry. Poetry was part of my life as a teenager. I loved poetry. My exposure to it was limited because I lived in a pre-internet age. It was hard to find books of poetry. It's hard to get introduced to poetry. I knew mainly Black poets because I took an African-American lit class in high school as an elective. And so that's where I got introduced to a lot of the poetry that I loved as a teenager. So I was a big Gwendolyn Brooks fan. I was a big Langston Hughes fan, Paul Laurence Dunbar. Like I was like a 16-year-old, like walking around with books of like Harlem Renaissance poetry. It was kind of nuts. So me and my girlfriend in high school, we'd sneak up on this railroad bridge in our town, and we would graffiti poetry on the column. That made its way into the Serpent King.
I was going to say, I know that. I know that move.
Yeah. So I did love poetry. I generally didn't write it, although I wrote a little bit of it. It was, I think, bad. I haven't revisited it. I can't find it, but my memory of it now is probably pretty bad. So then I became a musician. And for a long time, I was purely kind of an instrumentalist. Then I became a vocalist and instrumentalist. Then I started doing like old blues songs and old Appalachian songs where the lyrics are already there for me. Then I started to feel this kind of hunger to create my own lyrics, to do my own writing, create that poetry. And so that kind of was the start of the reawakening of the poetry. But there's a certain safety and security when you can hide behind a guitar and you can bury poetry in music, because you can use certain aspects of the music to buoy up weak lyrics. Like take the most genius songwriter you can imagine. Probably most of their songs don't hold up without the music underneath. Like they impart tone and mood and emotion through their performance of the song. And so you can kind of fudge a little bit that way. And so that's what I was doing. So then I started writing novels and kind of left the songwriting behind, but the poetry ember was kind of still burning. And I felt like I was ready in this book for the second to final frontier, which is publishing poetry hiding behind cash Pruitt, right? So hedging, like I said, but also hedging with, if people hated this poetry, I could always say, well, he's a high schooler. Like I never ask you in the text to believe that he's like some great genius. I ask you to believe that he's good enough that his poetry teacher wants to encourage him, which, as we all know, doesn't necessarily mean he's amazing. It means his poetry teacher sees in him a need that poetry is filling. I don't have Cash winning any poetry contests in the book. I don't have him getting published as a poet. I just have him working through shit as a poet. And I think that's probably pretty plausible with my skill level. I think I was able to write at the level of a plausibly skilled teenage boy in this book. And of course,
sorry.
I was just going to say quickly, the final frontier is, of course, is publishing poetry under my own name, and that is something I'm working toward.
Yeah, I'm excited for that because I think you do have a feature in poetry. I thought the poetry was really lovely. And there's one scene in particular that I loved where Cash is with this teacher who's guiding him into this this study. And in this one scene, she is literally guiding him through it. And he has this, one line, and she kind of shows him how you go from one line to the next, and then the different directions you can take that thought. And it's so beautiful. And I'm wondering, did you have a poetry teacher who walked you through that as well?
I sure didn't. That was something that I figured out purely on my own.
Wow.
And then I ran past my author friend Bree Cavallero, who writes the Study in Charlotte series. Amazing young adult author, right? People know her for her young adult novels. She considers herself a better poet than a young adult novelist, which is, I mean, remarkable because she's so amazing. But her poetry is indeed amazing. And she teaches poetry to high school students at this place called Interlochen in Michigan. And I don't know if you're familiar with it.
No.
But if you're not, it is an elite arts focused boarding school in the woods of Michigan. It is like, right, I know. I would get in it. The only way I would relive my teenage years is if I could be an Interlochen student. That's the only way you could get me to do it. But she teaches poetry to these kids, and they sit at a table, like a round table, 10 of them, and they talk like freaking 26-year-old MFA students. I've actually sat in on one of these classes, never felt dumber in my life. I've got a JD from Vanderbilt, never felt dumber than watching Bree and these 16-year-olds break down poetry and offer insights. So I got to see a little bit of the process there, but I kind of came up with it on my own. I kind of intuited it on my own, and then I ran it past her and had her say yay or nay. This is what I would do. This is what I wouldn't do.
Well done, because I marked that page and I'm like, oh, I might need this someday. This is incredibly useful tool. It's like such a step by step. And I'm like, okay, I can follow that.
If you ever ask me for poetry advice, though, I'm never going to be able to give it to you as myself. I'm going to have to be like, okay, I'm going to go get Dr. Adkins. Hang on. Yes, it's Dr. Adkins here.
I love it. She's such a good character. You always have such great characters. I think, one of the things that I respond to the most in your book, probably the number one thing, is that they are very character based. In addition to setting, I think you and I both put all of our focuses there. That's the thing we're interested in. But I always really like spending time with your characters. They're good people. I find them interesting. And I think it's probably because you and I both do put a lot of ourselves into our characters. And you were saying earlier how you give your characters all the things that you're interested in. And that's, what I generally do too. So naturally, I'm like, oh, these are my buds. But one of the things I find very enjoyable whenever I read in one of your new books is that I get to see characters come back. And again, you're like me, I do that too, where for me, it's this feeling of I can't let go. I have to keep talking about them. And I'll see those spots where they would naturally slide into the narrative. And it's like, here you go. Here's this person. They're still doing okay. Even my horror novels are technically connected to all of my others. The mentions are so small, but they are all connected. So I was, thank you for bringing back Nana Betsy from Goodbye Days, who, for anyone who's watching who read that book, it's the best chapter in Goodbye Days when the protagonist of that book actually spends this day with this woman who's lost her grandchild, and they do all the things that grandchild love to do together. And it's so so beautiful and positive. Like she's a character filled with so much hope. And then at the end of that book, because they live in Nashville for that one, right? I
Right.
think.
Yep.
She moves away and she moves to the mountains. Were you like so psyched when you realized, hey, this book is in the mountains, I can bring Betsy back? Because
I'm
I was so shocked to see her and it was thrilling.
Yes, I was beside myself with excitement when I connected the dots and I realized that it was laying right there. She had moved at the end of Goodbye Days back to like 30 minutes from where this new book was set. And in fact, I had even included a reference to Nana Betsy's brother in Goodbye Days. He reads
Yes.
something at Blake's funeral. None of this book was not in the plan at all in the Wild Light when I wrote Goodbye Days. None of it. It just all worked, and it made me so I was so excited. I was like humming with joy because I didn't go into it thinking, okay, yeah, I'm going to write this book and Nana Betsy's going to be in it. I was like, okay, I'm going to set this book in East Tennessee, and I started to connect the dots and just realize like, oh, this can happen. And by the way, let me just say, your use of Easter eggs is one of the big influences on me. In fact, just one of the things in general about the way I approach character is the way you approach character. Because I remember in the earliest days, when you were talking about long before you got published, but when you were working on the manuscript for Anna, and you were talking about these characters and how they kind of wouldn't leave you alone and how they spoke to you and how they inhabited you. And I was just enthralled by that thought. I was like, that would be so cool to have these imaginary beings existing within you, living lives that you never got to lead. Like, that would be so amazing. So, hearing you talk about characters really, really strongly influenced the way I approach characters. So, if it is resonant to you how they come out on the page, then that I'm sure is why. I was similarly excited when the perfect end to bring Lydia from Serpent King back
Oh, it's
presented itself.
perfect. I was so excited. I was so excited. And like you get to see that like she's got a cool job and she's like very professional now. She's really good at her job, and that's incredibly satisfying to see. Like, I mean, you found a way to slip everybody in. There are people from all of your books. They're watching the midnight matinee in the dorms. It's just it's really really fun. But yeah, Betsy for me was a highlight. She brings this like um this goodness and hope, which she always steps in just the right moment. And she played that role in Goodbye Days. And then it was lovely to see her perform that in a moment when Cash really needed that as well. And it was just so unexpected and lovely. And that you get to see that like her daughter who'd been struggling before is now doing okay too. And so thank you for that big boost of hope. I needed that right now. I want Betsy in my life to like come hang out with me and like make me feel good about all of my choices. But
So,
yeah.
so I have actually kind of an intense story about Betsy's daughter and why Betsy's daughter came back in the book.
Oh.
So I've got I had a friend named Mitzi who lived in Johnson City, and she used to come see my band play when we would play there, and she was really wonderful, a really sweet lady. And I realized when I wrote Goodbye Days only after that I'd given this character who's kind of a drug addict, kind of like on the way to dying, the name Mitzi. And I knew she read my books, and I wrote her this message and I apologized to her. I said, Mitzi, I'm so sorry. Like, I just needed a good East Tennessee girl name, and Mitzi's a good East Tennessee girl name. Um, I, I didn't mean to do that. Like, I wasn't trying to say anything about you by giving that character that name. And she was like, no, no, it's totally fine. I was totally glad to see my name in it. That was actually the last conversation we ever had. She was murdered by her boyfriend in
Oh my
Florida,
gosh.
and her body left in a swamp. So I was not kidding when I said this was an intense story. But
Oh,
when
Jeff.
when I know it's so deeply sad and horrible, and I realized that I had a duty to bring Mitzi back and give her the happy ending that real Mitzi didn't get. So that's kind of the story behind that?
Well, it was really beautiful, and it's just this small moment, and you have to know her history to know what it means by her showing up and being there at this meal with everyone. But it was really nice too, because this story also has a lot of people who have struggled with drug addiction and who have lost, and it's that thing that I really, again, admire about your work, and that you write about all the beauty of living here, and there is a lot of natural beauty and good people here, but a lot of the stereotypes are true, and in addition to that, the South is very, very riddled with the opioid epidemic and all of these deaths, and it's just lovely to see you bring that in such an honest way too. You always write about that so well. So I don't even know what question there is there. I just want to say, like, well done.
Well, your answer is thank you so much. You're going to make me cry.
Let's see, what haven't we talked about yet? Oh, there's something that's so Jeff in here that I love. It's this idea that okay, so we haven't talked a lot about Delaney. She is Cash's best friend who gets accepted into this great boarding school because she's like a super brilliant scientist. And there's this lovely relationship that she has with Cash's grandfather. They're both very close to his papa. And there's this sentence they always say, or that Papa always asks her, and it's, tell me something I don't know. And she'll spit out this like wild, cool fact. And that's something that I know, like, you carry around this, like this log of strange facts at all time. And I love it. I always learn things when I talk to you. And so it's a book that is like naturally filled with like absolutely outrageous and fascinating facts. And my favorite was one that I texted you while we were reading because I didn't understand. It kind of blew my mind. It's maybe the most simple fact that's in there. But guys, apparently, if you eat an apple from the top down, the core disappears. What are you talking about, Jeff? I haven't gotten to try it yet.
What's so amazing though is that wasn't even a fact imparted by Delaney. That was from V, who taught Cash that.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, but hey, listen, facts are facts. So yeah, try this, guys. If you take an apple, you twist off the stem, and you eat from the top down, the core just is not there. I cannot explain. Have you tried it, Steph?
Not yet. I'm desperate. I need to go get an apple so I can.
You got to go get an apple and try it. We're getting to apple season. So yeah, I don't know what the deal is, but like the fibers of the core like lie in such a way that they only offer resistance if you go in laterally. If you go in vertically, just gone. It is the weirdest thing ever. But yeah, I eat entire apples now. I was telling Steph, I would even eat the seeds. I'd be like, little almonds, until I found out somebody told me, oh yeah, so the reason they taste like little almonds is that they actually have little amounts of cyanide in them. So you probably shouldn't eat those apple seeds.
No.
All right. Well, okay, fine. I won't eat the apple seeds anymore, but.
Follow-up question. Who taught you this? Did you just figure it out? Like, I can't fathom the idea of turning an apple this way and being like, this is how I'm going to go in.
I love that, like,
I'm really stuck on this. I'm sorry.
No. I love according to Judeo-Christian tradition, the apple is maybe like the oldest fruit humans have been eating. And we are just now in the year 2021, like getting hip to this apple eating technology. I love it. Like, I wonder what other fruit eating technologies we're going to learn in the future. No. Okay. So you take a banana and you hold it in your hand and you just snap it and the peel just disappears into thin air. It's just gone.
Well, I did tell you that if you peel it from the end rather than the part that's like connected at the bunch, like most people, if you take a banana, you like start at the bunch part. But no, if you do it from the like nice, neat end, it comes right out so much easier. It's how monkeys eat it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, maybe humans picked up the apple eating technology from monkeys too. I mean, maybe we've got an exchange of technology going.
I'm fascinated. Okay. Okay. So let's get real for a moment, as if we haven't.
Okay.
You are releasing this book at a very difficult time that is incredibly stressful for absolutely everyone, including authors. Um, Sales are down unless you are a celebrity or a celebrity author. And like, this is a really phenomenal book. And I want to know, where were you at when you finished writing it? Like, had all of this started to happen? And how have your feelings changed around that? And like, if you could just put good vibes out into the world, like, what would you hope for this book?
Yeah, so this book is definitely the product of a difficult time in my life. Probably the most difficult 2 years of my life in the last couple decades. But it wasn't related to the pandemic. I actually mostly had this book done before the pandemic. I think I might have done a few edits on it, but it was largely written. The challenges in my life were all non-pandemic related. Um, the pandemic itself has been, on the one hand, there have been upsides in that I'm an introvert and I love the pace of life of quarantine. I love the quietness of it. I love the amount of time staying at home. I love being at home. You love your home too. You love the area you've built around you. Um, and so that's something I like. I think it's fun in the work context to get to see the humanity of coworkers. Like, I feel like it creates a more human workspace when you get to see coworkers' kids and pets and what they've chosen to decorate their walls with. And there's something very kind of moving to me about that. I love commonality of human experience, and I love to see kind of, you know, some of the private aspects of people's lives, not in a perverted way. And of course, you're off to a bang when you have to qualify something with not in the perverted way. But truly, I think that's nice. But the thing that's been so distressing to me about this period is just kind of the general lack of empathy, and so many people who would not take even the smallest measures to protect others from harm, which is very dispiriting. So there's been that. I would count myself among the number who were not particularly creatively fruitful during this period. I did write some poems. I did start working on a YA verse novel with an author friend that I'm excited about. But other than that, people were writing symphonies and recording albums and writing whole books, and that just wasn't me during this period. Um, so that was kind of my experience of the pandemic. What do I hope for this book? It's the same as as all my books, really. That I have planted my stake in the world once more. I have said, this is what's beautiful to me. I hope you will find it beautiful too. I hope it'll move people. If I can be cynical and business minded, I hope it buys me a few years of relevance until I can write another book, just so that I'm, not forgotten. That would be nice. But I don't hold much hope of being some great bestseller. In fact, if you look at the kind of books I write in the adult realm, kind of character driven, emotional Southern literature, there, I, I, I I get to do a lot better in YA than I would be doing over there, writing the exact same kind of books, right? I basically get to write Southern lit and sell more than 500 copies of a book, which is very nice. And certainly there are some really talented authors working in the adult space, writing contemporary Southern literature who don't find the readership that I've been fortunate enough to find with the librarians and the teachers who teach the book. So I hope the people who need the book find it. That's it. That's my hope for every book. That's my hope for this book.
I love that. I love that. And I want to quickly add that, like, this book we keep bringing up some sad things that are in it, but I just really, really, really want to express to viewers who have not yet read it or your other work that like you are such a funny writer, and this is like a fun book. You're really good at making something really accessible, something like really challenging, very, very accessible. Like it doesn't, it's so deeply moving, and it never feels like an effort on my behalf. I'm just like flying through it. It's so good. And you also just teed me up so well into the next question, which was, I did ask you one thing ahead of time. I would love for you to recommend some Southern fiction. One, I don't read a ton of it, so I would love to know what you're enjoying and what's influenced you. And I would love the viewers to get a little bit more of a taste of that too. So in case they have purchased your book and they want a little more of it, like here are some more things that you can buy from Malaprops tonight.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Well, this is a lot of fun. I love recommending books. So Southern Lit, let's start with a great YA that came out this year, Indestructible Object by Mary McCoy. Great book. Takes place in Midtown Memphis. Memphis is a great city. It is an underrated city. It's a very, very cool place, has a very vibrant creative scene. And this book is just like the perfect Midtown Memphis book. Indestructible Object by Mary McCoy, contemporary YA, Southern setting, artists. I'm terrible at describing what books are about. I'm bad at describing even my own books, so I'm not going to try.
No, that's awesome. I had not heard of that one before. That's exciting.
I think you'd love it, Steph. I really do. The OG, Where Things Come Back by John Corey Whaley. I mean, this is the book that really showed me that there was a place in YA for soulful contemporary YA Southern Lit. This was a very big influence on me. John Corey Whaley was one of my first author friends. He became friends with me before I had a manuscript. There was no reason for him to become friends with me. He's just a cool guy. And so we're buds to this day. I'm sure y'all know about that one, though, probably. I don't think there are many people who know about my books who don't know about John Corey Whaley. Shiner by Amy Jo Burns. This is an adult one. This is an Appalachian book. Snake Handlers. If you like The Serpent King, you will like this book, Shiner. Clay's Quilt by Silas House. Silas blurbed in The Wild Light. He's one of my absolute heroes. Just, I think, the best living Appalachian writer. His books are so beautiful, so soulful, so full of heart. Just really make Appalachian people, give them just tremendous dignity, show the beauty of their way of life. Clay's Quilt by Silas House, incredible. And of course, Salvage the Bones by Jesmyn Ward. This is Deep South, takes place in the Gulf Coast of Mississippi during Hurricane Katrina. Just an unbelievable book. I mean, the language and the blood in this book that pulses through this book, I mean, it's like otherworldly. She's incredible. So those are some.
You gave that book to me as a gift one year for Christmas.
Did I?
Yeah.
What a great gift. What a thoughtful guy I am.
It was a great book.
Nice. Well, I'm really happy I did that. Yay for me.
That's right. I don't see any questions have popped up. So if you have any, if you're watching, go for it. And if not, like, we'll just keep talking, because
I can recommend some
really
poetry books. I got a stack.
Oh,
of
you
poetry
have some
books to
poetry. I would
Yeah.
love a couple of those. That would be amazing.
Yeah. Well, you're gonna get 6. So River Hymns by Tyree Day. This is incredible. Rose by Lee Young Lee. Incredible. Set to Music, A Wildfire by Ruth Awad. Incredible. Bright Dead Things by Ada Limon.
Ooh,
Incredible.
good title.
It's so good. You would love that book, Steph. What the Living Do by Marie Howe. You're seeing my little
I love
tabs
that
here. And another one of my blurbers, Ocean Vuong, Night Sky with Exit Wounds. This is stunning poetry.
Okay,
so those are some of my poetry recommendations.
Out of all of those, you knowing me, which one would you hand to me first?
Bright Dead Things by Ada
Oh,
Limon. That's
I
what
mean,
I'd
it's a
hand
good,
to you first.
okay,
Yeah.
awesome. It's a good
I,
title. I
I,
want to grow my relationship with poetry. I'm literally like using this as an opportunity to enrich myself. Like, let me ask you questions that are useful to me.
yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So there's one more thing that I would love to talk to you about for a moment. And it's the fact that you wrote this character who is this like science expert. Um, and like very believably so. And we were talking about this a little before the feed started, and I wasn't like you sold me, and I'm like, oh, Jeff must be like know more about science than I gave him credit for. And perhaps that's not the case.
Not at all. I am not a scientist. I come from scientists. My father is a pharmaceutical chemist. He knows science. Delaney was a difficult character to write because I'm not a genius and she is. So it's really hard to write characters who are smarter than you. I did that in The Serpent King with Lydia for sure. I did that in Goodbye Days with Dr. Mendez. But it's a challenge every time to write a character who's smarter than you. I was not about to give Delaney a point of view in the book because I was not about to try to write from the point of view of a genius. I'd be like, should she think about math more? I don't know. The best I could do was to posit what it would look like to an outside observer, how that genius would manifest. And I decided that one of the ways that genius would manifest is in her sharing little bits and pieces of her kind of voluminous dragnet seeking knowledge. Like I just imagine her like a whale shark going for plankton, like just with information, just every night staying up till 2 a.m., just going down Wikipedia wormholes and just following link after link and just taking in information in this incredible brain that is wired so differently from normal brains with her photographic memory and synthesizing all that information and drawing patterns and understandings and I figure that's what goes on in the brain of a genius. I can never understand those processes, but maybe I can show the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. And in this case, the tip of the iceberg were little scientific facts. Now, I am not a scientist, but I do love to gather strange and interesting facts because I'm fascinated by the bizarreness of our world and the strangeness of our world. The fact that there used to be a species of parrot that lived in Tennessee and North Carolina until really recently. Like recently.
That blew my mind. I had never heard that before.
Guys,
Yeah.
look up the Carolina parakeet. It's the only parrot that was endemic to North America. I guess if you don't count Mexico as North America, like the United States. But this was a species of parrot that just lived in America. You know, just this beautiful green and yellow parrot. And of course, we drove them to extinction because we're horrible human beings, and that's what we do. But that was just fascinating to me. When I was a kid, I used to go to the library and I would spend hours. And one of the things I would do is I'd go over to the reference section. This was the early version of falling down a Wikipedia hole. And I would get these books that were like 1,001 interesting facts. And I would just read them cover to cover and just absorb facts. To this day, I think I could probably hold my own on Jeopardy just from that youth of having devoured those books of facts.
That feels very, very you. And also a lot like my husband. My husband is like, wants the facts, the weird stuff. He's very trivia based, loves Jeopardy.
Yep.
So a question did come in and we sort of answered it already, but we'll just get a little more specific on it. And Laura Moe asks, are you drafting a new book? He says you are working on something. Did you call it verse or poetry with another person? How long have you been working on it? How's it going?
So we've been working on it for a little while. She had to put it aside while she finished this duology that she's working on, but we're hoping to pick it back up soon. And we've got about 7,000 words, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you consider that a verse novel is generally 30,000, then we're almost a third done, which is kind of exciting. It's influenced by the Before Sunset series with Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy. Takes place over 3 years. These two, a guy and a girl, meet at this arts camp, and they decide to meet each year and have this one night called Sunrise Night, where they just stay out all night and have adventures. And so anyway, we call it a novel in verse and conversation because both of us love writing dialogue so much that we couldn't write a novel that didn't have dialogue. And it's hard to include dialogue in a verse novel. So we've got poems that kind of move the story along in their way, but then we'll have scenes that are just dialogue, almost purely dialogue, like maybe a little action beat here and there, but for the most part, it's just pure dialogue. Like you could act it out on a stage. And then
That's awesome.
more verse. So we call it a novel in verse and conversation.
I really love that. I love that twist on it. You had not mentioned that to me before, and that's really exciting because you are very good at dialogue.
Well, thank you.
And Patricia, did I steal your thunder by saying that question? Is that why you came on? I sneaked in there and then I'm like, oh no, Patricia's here. I think that was her job. I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's totally all right with me. It's a pleasure to listen to two authors who are great friends and who read each other closely and then articulate these influences and the connective tissue of their work, their thoughts, and it's a rare treat. And I really am very moved by not just your friendship, but your ability to talk to each other in a way that is very welcoming to viewers. And I really appreciate that. And I know our audience is much better for it. So I want to thank you for sharing all of your idiosyncrasies, your interests, your dynamic engagement with craft and with friendship, because not everybody is a friend who comes on here, because sometimes people don't know each other and they're just they're in the same genre or something like that. But I think there's a future in this.
Patricia's trying to get us to do a novel together, and I have already said I am so slow. I would love to write a book with all of my friends, and I take years. Oh my gosh. So like my most recent book, which I'm going to take one moment to plug. So
please
I have a
do.
book coming out. I wish I had an advanced copy to hold up. I do not. Those do not exist in this universe right now. It's only digital, but it will be out at the end of the month. It's called The Woods Are Always Watching. It releases August 31st. I will be back here by myself. Who knows what's going to come out of my mouth. But I will be talking about that on August 31st. It's my second horror novel. It's my follow-up to this one, which I do have a copy of. There's Someone Inside Your House.
Brilliant book.
Which is this one's a slasher novel. The new one is it's in the same vein, but it takes place in the North Carolina woods. So it's the first like full-length novel I've gotten to do that is a local story. It's local horror. And it's very human-based horror again, as opposed to anything supernatural. I'm only scared by things that can hurt me in real life. But I'm very excited to be back soon talking about that. You can pre-order it now. This is going to be a movie on Netflix very soon. I am legally not allowed to say when, but it is soon. And I've seen it, and it's really good, you guys. Like, I was really nervous to watch it. It's great. I hope that you guys will look for that and watch that when it happens.
I'm so excited. And these books are brilliant, you guys. Nobody knows horror like Steph. She is tapped into it. All the emotion and the interiority and the character you love in all of Steph's novels, she brings over to horror, and it's just phenomenal. I couldn't be more excited for this book.
Thank you. Thank you. It's the first one that I wrote that did not have a love story in it, because it managed to sneak into this book still. 'cause that's what I mainly write. But yeah, it was the first time where it's just two best friends going out into the woods and running into something very, very, very bad. It was fun.
Chilling.
It
Thank you
sounds
so much, Malaprops, for having me. And
Thank
thank you,
you.
Steph, for doing this. I know you choose your events very carefully, and such an honor. You are amazing. Thank you.
Thanks. I've always got room in my calendar for you, Jeff. It's a very limited calendar, limited people, but you pass the bar every time.
I feel so good about that. Thank you.
It's good
Thanks
talking to
everyone
you.
for being here, and you can come back and watch this event again with the link that you used tonight. It's on Malaprop's YouTube channel. We hope you all have a lovely evening. You're much better for it now that you've listened to Jeff and Stephanie, and so congratulations, Jeff. We're really so delighted that you could be here with us this evening, and congratulations on In the Wild Light. Thanks everyone. Have a good evening. Good night.